In life, we often find ourselves facing moments when our efforts feel unnoticed, insignificant, or even fruitless. It's in these times when we are working in the background, serving faithfully in small, seemingly unimportant ways, that God is often doing His greatest work in us. Well, I want to remind you today that faithfulness in the small things is not only necessary for growth, but is the very foundation for the greater blessings God has planned for you. You see, God does not overlook the small things. In fact, He uses these moments to shape us, to prepare us for the larger responsibilities and blessings that He has in store. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever felt like what you're doing right now doesn't matter? Maybe you're serving in a position that seems small, or you're working behind the scenes where no one can see. Perhaps you've been praying for something for years, and it seems like your efforts are going unnoticed by the world around you. But let me tell you, God is watching. He sees the faithfulness in the small things, and He is using it to prepare you for the greater things He wants to do in your life. This is the essence of what it means to live with true faithfulness. Jesus Himself spoke about this in Luke 16:10, where He says, "Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much." This verse is a powerful reminder that God does not elevate us to greater things without first testing our faithfulness in the little things. You see, God is looking for hearts that are faithful, not just when the spotlight is on them, but even in the quiet, everyday moments when no one else is watching. Think about the story of David. Before he became the king of Israel, David was a young shepherd boy tending sheep in the fields. His responsibilities were humble. His tasks were simple, and his position was far from glamorous. But in those quiet moments, while alone with his sheep, David was learning to be faithful. He learned to protect the sheep from lions and bears, and it was in those moments that God was preparing him for the greater responsibility that lay ahead. David's faithfulness in the small, unnoticed tasks prepared him for the throne. In the same way, you and I are called to be faithful in the small things. It might be a job that feels beneath your abilities, or a relationship that seems difficult to navigate. It might be serving in a church ministry or helping someone who can't repay you. No task is too small when it comes to serving God. If you're faithful in these moments, God will trust you with more. It is through your faithfulness in the seemingly insignificant moments that He can shape your character, your perseverance, and your ability to handle greater blessings in the future. God doesn't just want us to be faithful when everything is going according to our plan. He wants us to be faithful even when it's hard, even when we don't see immediate results, even when it feels like no one appreciates our efforts. The Bible tells us in Galatians 6:9, "Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up." This verse encourages us not to grow weary in doing good, even when we can't see the fruit of our labor right away. God is at work even when we can't see it, and He is preparing us for the harvest that is coming. In Matthew 25:21, Jesus tells the parable of the faithful servant. His master replied, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness." This parable reminds us that God rewards faithfulness. He looks for hearts that are willing to serve, even when the tasks seem small or insignificant. It's not about the size of the task, it's about the heart behind it. When we are faithful with what God has given us, He will bless us with even more responsibility and greater opportunities to serve Him. You see, God is preparing us through the small things. He is building our character, teaching us patience, and developing our ability to handle more. He knows that if we can be trusted with the little things, we can be trusted with the bigger things. It's not just about the work we do. It's about how we do it and the attitude we bring to it. Are we serving with a heart of gratitude and humility, even when no one is watching? Are we doing it as unto the Lord, not for the praise of men, but for His glory? This is what God is looking for in His servants. As you navigate the small tasks and seemingly insignificant moments in your life, remember that God is preparing you. He is using these moments to shape your character, to build your faith, and to develop your ability to handle greater blessings. You may not see it now, but every small act of faithfulness is a stepping stone toward the greater things God has in store for you. Think about it. When you are faithful in the little things, God can trust you with the bigger things. When you are faithful in your relationships, He can trust you with deeper connections and greater influence. When you are faithful in your work, He can trust you with greater opportunities and promotions. When you are faithful in your walk with God, He can trust you with a deeper intimacy with Him. It all begins with the small things. So, my dear friend, do not despise the day of small beginnings. Do not grow weary in doing good. Be faithful in the small things, and trust that God is at work behind the scenes. He is preparing you for something greater. As you remain faithful, He will open doors that you never imagined, and He will bless you beyond measure. Remember, faithfulness is not about how grand the task is. It's about the faithfulness of your heart. And when you are faithful with what God has given you, He will bless you with even more. Trust in His timing, trust in His plan, and know that every small act of faithfulness is preparing you for the greater things He has in store. You are not unnoticed. You are not forgotten. God is at work, and He is shaping you into the person He has created you to be. Good to be. So keep going, keep trusting, and keep being faithful in the small things. For it is through these small acts of faithfulness that God will bring about the greater blessings in your life. Have you ever felt like the small tasks you're doing don't matter? Have you wondered why your efforts seem to go unnoticed or perhaps unappreciated? It's easy to grow discouraged when it feels like you're doing everything right, but nothing seems to change. Maybe you're working hard at a job that doesn't seem to be leading anywhere, or you're pouring yourself into a ministry and it feels like you're not making a difference. But I want to remind you, my dear friend, that the small things are never insignificant in God's eyes. He is watching, He is working, and He is using these very moments to prepare you for the greater blessings He has in store. You see, in the eyes of the world, greatness is often measured by visibility, by achievements, by public recognition. But in God's kingdom, greatness is defined by faithfulness in the little things, the quiet moments when no one is watching. In Matthew 25:23, we read about the parable of the talents, where Jesus says, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things." Notice how Jesus doesn't say, "Well done, good and successful servant." He doesn't measure greatness by what is seen or by how much we accomplish on our own. He measures greatness by our faithfulness. If we are faithful with the small things, He will trust us with greater things. When you look at the lives of many great men and women of faith, you'll notice that their success didn't come all at once. They didn't start out in grand positions, and they certainly didn't have an easy road. Take Moses, for example. Before God used Moses to lead the Israelites out of Egypt, Moses was a shepherd tending to a few sheep in the wilderness. For 40 years, Moses was faithfully working with those sheep, and during that time, God was preparing him for the monumental task ahead. In the wilderness, Moses learned patience, humility, and trust in God. It was there in those seemingly small hidden moments that God molded him into the leader who would go on to lead millions out of bondage. The same principle applies to us today. God is using the small tasks in your life to prepare you for something greater. You may be asking, why is this job, this responsibility, this relationship so difficult? Why does it feel like I'm stuck? But I want you to know that God is not wasting these moments. He is using them to shape your character, build your endurance, and prepare you for greater opportunities. What seems small now will become a stepping stone to something bigger in His plan. Just as He was preparing Moses in the desert, He is preparing you where you are. Every challenge, every small act of obedience, every moment of faithfulness is shaping you for the greater things that God has in store. In our fast-paced world, we often look for instant results. We want quick success, instant gratification, and immediate rewards. But God's timing is different. His process is not about rushing from one success to the next. It's about shaping our hearts, our attitudes, and our faith. And that process takes time. I know that waiting can be difficult, especially when you feel like you're doing everything you can and not seeing the results you hope for. But I encourage you to trust in God's timing. Remember, God is never in a hurry, but He is always right on time. Consider the example of Joseph. Joseph was sold into slavery by his brothers, falsely accused and thrown into prison. For years, he faced hardship and disappointment. Yet in the midst of those struggles, Joseph remained faithful to God. He didn't allow his circumstances to dictate his faith. He stayed true to the values he had learned as a child, and because of that, God eventually elevated him to a position of power and influence. Joseph's faithfulness in the small things, the way he conducted himself in the prison, the way he served others, the way he trusted God even when things didn't make sense, led to his promotion. His faithfulness didn't go unnoticed. God saw it, and in his perfect timing, he elevated Joseph to a place of great influence, where Joseph was able to save not only his family, but an entire nation. Joseph's story reminds us that even when things seem bleak, when it feels like we're stuck in the small and insignificant, God is still at work. Your faithfulness today is building a foundation for the future. It's not about the size of your current task, but about how you're approaching it. Are you doing it with a heart of gratitude? Are you doing it for God's glory, even when no one else sees? If you can be trusted with the small things, God will trust you with much more. God doesn't waste any moment of our lives. Every trial, every victory, every small act of service is part of the larger picture He is painting for you. If you can be faithful in the little things, God will open doors that you never imagined. You may not see it now, but God is preparing you for something greater. As you remain faithful where you are, God will use those small acts of obedience to position you for the next step in His plan for your life. And this is where the blessing lies. It's not in the abites, moments, but in the everyday, seemingly insignificant choices to remain faithful. It's about how you show up each day, how you serve those around you, and how you honor God in your everyday life. When you choose faithfulness in the small things, you are aligning yourself with God's purpose for your life. Your actions may seem small to the world, but they are significant in the eyes of God. And when you honor Him in the small things, He will honor you with greater blessings. Let's not despise the days of small beginnings. As the Bible tells us in Zechariah 4:10, do not despise these small beginnings, for the Lord rejoices to see the work begin. God is pleased when we take that first step of faith, even if it seems small or insignificant. He knows the bigger picture. He sees the end result, and He is at work behind the scenes, preparing you for the future He has planned for you. Trust Him and keep being faithful in the small things. God is working in ways that you can't always see, and He is preparing you for greater blessings that are yet to come. As we continue to explore how faithfulness in small things leads to greater blessings, I want you to pause for a moment and reflect on your own life. Think about the areas where you've been faithful, even when it seemed like no one was watching. Perhaps you've been faithful in raising your children, in serving your community, or in working diligently at your job. Maybe you prayed faithfully for a loved one or continued to trust God, even when circumstances seemed hopeless. You might have asked yourself, does it really matter? Is God paying attention to these small efforts? I want to tell you with absolute certainty, it matters. And God sees, He knows, and He is pleased with your faithfulness. One of the greatest challenges in life is the temptation to believe that the small, hidden tasks don't matter. It's easy to become discouraged when the world doesn't recognize our efforts. When you're faithfully doing the small things and it feels like no one is noticing, it's easy to think that you're wasting your time. But let me tell you, God is not blind to your labor of love. He sees everything, and He uses these small acts of faithfulness to shape us for His greater purposes. In 1 Corinthians 4:2, Paul writes, moreover, it is required in stewards that a man be found faithful. What does it mean to be a steward? A steward is someone entrusted with a responsibility, someone who has been given something to care for. And the scripture tells us that the requirement for being a good steward is faithfulness. Faithfulness in the small things, in the everyday tasks, and the things that seem insignificant to the world, is what God looks for in a steward. And let me tell you, God never overlooks faithfulness. It's easy to become disheartened when we feel like our hard work isn't being noticed. But remember this, God sees every single act of faithfulness, and He is preparing us for something far greater than we can imagine. I want you to think about the story of David. David was a young shepherd, and the Bible tells us that he spent his days tending his father's sheep. It may have seemed like a small menial task, but it was in the fields that David learned to be faithful. He fought off lions and bears to protect his flock. No one was there to applaud him for his bravery. No one was there to tell him how great he was, but God saw it. God saw the heart of a young man who was willing to do whatever it took, even the small things, to care for what had been entrusted to him. And because of David's faithfulness, God eventually raised him up to be the king of Israel. David's story is a powerful reminder that no task is too small in God's eyes. The same principle applies to you and me. Whatever you are doing right now, whether it's taking care of your home, raising children, working a job, or serving in ministry, God is using those small acts of faithfulness to prepare you for something bigger. You may not see the results immediately, but trust me, God is working behind the scenes, using those very moments to shape your character, build your faith, and position you for the greater things He has planned for you. Sometimes we also need to remember that the small things often teach us the most valuable lessons. It's easy to look at a person's success and think, I want that. I want the fame, the recognition, the platform. But what we don't see is the years of faithfulness, the countless small moments that led to that success. Success in God's kingdom isn't built on what we can see. It's built on the unseen, the quiet moments where we choose to trust, to be faithful, even when no one is watching. It's in those moments that we grow, that we develop character, that we learn to rely on God instead of ourselves. Take the example of the Apostle Paul. Before he became the great preacher and missionary, Paul spent years in obscurity, training, learning, and being prepared. He had to go through seasons of preparation before God used him in powerful ways. And in those seasons, Paul was faithful. He wasn't out in the limelight. He wasn't gaining a massive following, but he was faithful to the calling God had placed on his life. And because of that, God used him to spread the gospel across the world. In the same way, God is preparing you in the hidden seasons of your life. He is building your character, teaching you how to rely on Him, and shaping you into the person He wants you to be. The small things you do today may not feel significant, but they are laying the foundation for something much greater. You may be walking through a season of obscurity, where no one knows your name, where it feels like no one is noticing your efforts. But know this, God sees you. He sees your faithfulness, and He is preparing you for a greater future. The truth is that God doesn't waste any season of our lives. Every moment of faithfulness, no matter how small, is part of His perfect plan. You may be going through a difficult time right now, and it might feel like the things you're doing don't matter. You may feel like you're just going through the motions, and you're wondering when God will open doors and bring the breakthrough you've been praying for. But I want to encourage you today. Keep being faithful. Keep doing what you know is right. Keep serving, keep loving, keep trusting, and keep persevering. The small things matter. They matter to God, and they matter in His plan for your life. And the wonderful thing about God is that He doesn't just reward us for our faithfulness. He also uses it to prepare us to handle greater blessings. If you're faithful with the little things, God will entrust you with more. In Luke 16:10, Jesus says, "Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much." The small tasks you are handling today are preparing you for greater responsibilities in the future. God is teaching you how to manage the little things so that you can handle the bigger blessings He wants to bring into your life. But it's all about faithfulness. Stay faithful, and in His perfect timing, God will elevate you. Remember, my friend, that God's eyes are always on you. He sees the small things, the hidden moments of faithfulness, and He is working behind the scenes to bring His plan to fruition. So take heart and be encouraged. Your faithfulness is not in vain. Keep trusting, keep serving, and keep believing. God has great things ahead for you, and He is preparing you through the small, everyday acts of obedience. In the journey of faith, we often find ourselves waiting. We wait for answers to prayer, for doors to open, for things to change. It's during these seasons of waiting that we are tempted to question whether God is really working in our lives or whether our efforts are in vain. But I want to tell you today, my friend, that God is at work even when we can't see it. And it's during these times that He is preparing us for greater blessings, often through the small things we do in obedience. Let's think for a moment about the life of Joseph in the Bible. Joseph's story is one of incredible highs and devastating lows. He was the favored son of Jacob, but his brothers, out of jealousy, sold him into slavery. It seemed like his dreams had been shattered, and his life would never be the same again. But Joseph remained faithful, even in the face of hardship. He was faithful in Potiphar's house, even though he had every reason to be bitter. He was faithful in the prison, even when he had been unjustly thrown there. And it was through his faithfulness in these small, seemingly insignificant tasks that God was preparing him for something much greater. Joseph's story teaches us that our faithfulness is never wasted, no matter how small or how difficult the task may seem. In the moments when we feel like giving up, when we wonder why we're still doing the same thing over and over, God is shaping us. He is building our character, strengthening our faith, and preparing us for the blessings that are to come. It's easy to get discouraged when we don't see the results of our efforts immediately. But remember, God's timing is always perfect. He sees the bigger picture, and He is using every season of your life to prepare you for something greater. When Joseph finally became the second in command in Egypt, he was able to handle the responsibility because he had learned the value of faithfulness in the small things. He had learned to trust God, even when it seemed like his life was falling apart. And because of his faithfulness, God elevated him to a place of influence and power, where he was able to save not only Egypt, but also his own family from famine. The key lesson here is that faithfulness in the small things prepares us for greater blessings, greater responsibilities, and greater opportunities. We must not despise the small tasks, the hidden seasons, or the waiting periods. God is using those moments to shape us, to refine us, and to prepare us for His purposes. It's during these times of faithfulness that God teaches us important lessons about trust, patience, and obedience. Jesus Himself spoke about this principle in Luke 16:10, saying, "Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much." Notice that Jesus didn't say, "Whoever is given much will be trusted with even more." He said that faithfulness with the little things, with the things that seem insignificant, is what qualifies us for greater things. If you can be trusted with the small tasks, if you can be faithful in the everyday moments, God will entrust you with greater responsibilities and blessings. You may be asking, how does this apply to my life right now? Perhaps you're in a season where it feels like you're doing all the right things, but nothing is changing. Maybe you're working hard, serving others, and being faithful, yet you don't see the breakthrough you've been praying for. I want to encourage you. Don't give up. Keep being faithful, even in the small things. God sees you. He knows what you're going through, and He is using this season to prepare you for something bigger. It's easy to focus on the end goal, to want to skip ahead to the part where we've reached our destination, where we've achieved our dreams. But often, it's not the destination that shapes us. It's the journey. It's the small decisions we make every day, the acts of obedience that no one else sees, that prepare us for what God has in store. And as we remain faithful in those moments, God works in us, refining our hearts, building our character, and preparing us for the greater blessings that are to come. Remember the story of the widow's offering in Mark 12:41-44. Jesus was sitting in the temple watching people give their offerings. Many wealthy individuals gave large sums, but Jesus noticed a poor widow who gave 2 small coins. In the eyes of the world, it was a small, insignificant offering. But Jesus commended her, saying, "This poor widow has put more into the treasury than all the others." Her faithfulness in the small things was more valuable to God than the large offerings of the wealthy. Why? Because her heart was right, and she gave all she had. It wasn't the size of the offering that mattered, but the faithfulness behind it. In the same way, God is looking at your heart today. He sees the small things you're doing. He sees the prayers you pray in the quiet moments, the sacrifices you make behind the scenes, and the obedience you show when no one is watching. And He is pleased with your faithfulness. It may seem small to you, but in God's eyes, it is a precious offering. So, my friend, if you're feeling discouraged in your current season, take heart. God is not overlooking your faithfulness. He is using this time to prepare you for greater things. Keep trusting, keep serving, and keep being faithful. The small things matter. They matter to God, and they matter in His plan for your life. Your faithfulness today will position you for the blessings of tomorrow. God is faithful to His promises, and He will honor your faithfulness in due time. Remember the words of Galatians 6:9. Let us not become weary in doing good, for for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Your harvest is coming, my friend. The blessings you've been waiting for are on the way. And as you continue to be faithful, God will pour out His favor upon you, preparing you for the greater things He has in store. So let me encourage you. Stay faithful in the small things. Your faithfulness is not in vain. God is watching, He is working, and He is preparing you for greater blessings. The best is yet to come. Keep trusting in His perfect timing. In life, there will always be times when we feel like we are doing everything right, yet the results don't seem to follow. It's in these moments of doubt, when we look around and wonder why we aren't seeing the fruits of our labor, that we must remember one simple truth. God's timing is perfect. We often try to rush through seasons, wanting to see results immediately. But the reality is that faithfulness in small things often requires patience, trust, and perseverance. What may seem like a slow process or a small act today will have a much larger impact in the future. Look at the life of David. He was anointed to be king as a young boy, yet he didn't immediately step into the throne room. Instead, he spent years serving his father, caring for his sheep and honing the skills that would later serve him in battle and leadership. It wasn't glamorous work. It wasn't the type of work that would garner attention or applause, but it was necessary. Through those years, David learned to trust in God, to lean on Him in times of loneliness and hardship, and to prepare for the responsibility that would one day be his. David's faithfulness in the small things, his care for the sheep, his quiet worship, his courage when facing the lion and the bear, prepared him for the enormous task of leading a nation. But he wasn't just prepared because of his physical skills. He was prepared because his heart had been shaped by the small moments, the mundane tasks, the things that others might have overlooked. Those moments taught him humility, dependence on God, and the ability to persevere when things got tough. And it's the same for you and me. We often look at the big picture, at the end result, and long to see the culmination of our hard work. But God isn't just interested in the destination. He is interested in what He's doing in our hearts and lives along the way. He uses the small things, the everyday acts of faithfulness, to mold and shape us into the people He wants us to be. It's easy to get discouraged when we feel like our efforts are unnoticed. We live in a world that values results, immediate gratification, and visible success. But the Bible teaches us a different way of thinking. In 1 Samuel 16:7, God tells the prophet Samuel, "A man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." While people may be focused on outward appearances and the big successes, God is more concerned with the attitude of our hearts and the way we remain faithful, even when no one is watching. Jesus often used parables to teach the importance of faithfulness in small things. In Matthew 25, He tells the parable of the talents, where a master gives his servants different amounts of money to steward while he is away. 2 of the servants were faithful with what they had been given, and when the master returned, he commended them and gave them even greater responsibility. But the 3rd servant, who was given only 1 talent, buried it out of fear, and when the master returned, he rebuked him for his lack of faithfulness. The lesson here is clear. God doesn't compare us to others based on what we've been given, but He looks at how we manage what we have. Even the small things matter to God, and when we are faithful with what we've been entrusted, He will reward us in due time. We often focus on what we don't have, what we wish we could do, or the dreams that seem out of reach. But the question God asks us is not, what do you have that others don't? But what are you doing with what I've given you? It's easy to look at our circumstances and feel discouraged. But God has equipped us with everything we need for the work He has called us to do. We must learn to be faithful in the small things, to steward what we have with excellence, and to trust that God will take care of the rest. Think about the story of the widow's oil in 2 Kings 4. She was a woman in desperate need, but God used her small amount of oil to bring about a miraculous provision. The prophet Elisha instructed her to gather as many jars as she could, and as she began to pour out the little oil she had, it miraculously multiplied. What may have seemed like an insignificant amount to her became the means of her salvation. This story reminds us that even in times of lack, when we feel like we don't have enough, God is able to multiply what we have when we faithfully surrender it to Him. Faithfulness in small things means trusting that God can take what we have and use it for His glory. It's about being faithful with what's in our hands today, knowing that God can multiply it in ways we cannot imagine. It may not always look like we expect it to, and it may not always happen on our timeline, but God is always at work, even in the smallest of actions. When we are faithful, even in what seems like the most insignificant tasks, we open the door for God to do something incredible. This is a truth that we must remind ourselves of every day. God uses the small things to prepare us for greater things. Our faithfulness in the quiet, unnoticed moments is not in vain. It is laying the foundation for the blessings and opportunities that God has planned for us. And when we stay faithful, when we continue to serve, to give, to pray, and to trust, we can be confident that God is working behind the scenes to bring His perfect will to pass. So, my friend, let me encourage you today. Don't despise the small things. Don't become discouraged if you feel like you're not seeing immediate results. God is using these moments to shape you, to refine you, and to prepare you for greater blessings. Keep being faithful in the small things and trust that God is at work in ways you can't yet see. The best is yet to come. Remember, the process is just as important as the outcome. As you remain faithful in the small things, God is preparing you for something greater. Stay the course. Keep trusting Him. And know that your faithfulness today will lead to greater blessings tomorrow. Faithfulness in small things is not about striving for perfection or seeking immediate recognition. It's about making the decision every day to do what God has called you to do, even when it seems like no one is watching. We live in a world that celebrates instant success and immediate results. But God's ways are not our ways. His kingdom operates differently. The small things, the quiet moments of obedience, the little steps of faith, they matter. They matter to God, and they matter in the grand plan He has for your life. When you look at the Bible, you'll find countless stories of people who were faithful in small things before they were entrusted with something greater. One of the most prominent examples is that of Joseph, whose life is marked by periods of suffering, misunderstanding, and waiting. As a young man, Joseph was given a dream that he would one day rule over his family. But that dream seemed impossible after he was betrayed by his brothers and sold into slavery. Instead of immediately stepping into the leadership role he was promised, Joseph spent years in Egypt, first as a servant in Potiphar's house and then as a prisoner. During those years, he could have grown bitter. He could have abandoned his faith, turned away from the promises God had given him. But instead, Joseph remained faithful in the small things. He trusted God even in the darkest moments of his life. And it was in those small, seemingly insignificant tasks that God was preparing him for something greater. Joseph's faithfulness in the small things when no one was watching was the key to his promotion. As he served Potiphar and later the prison guard, he demonstrated integrity, responsibility, and leadership. He didn't seek recognition. He simply did his work as if he were doing it for the Lord. And when the time came, God elevated him to the position of authority he had been promised. Joseph had learned, through years of small acts of faithfulness, that God was with him in every season, and that even in the most difficult times, God was preparing him for His purposes. When you are faithful in the small things, you are building a foundation that will hold you when God brings you to the next level. The truth is, if you are not faithful in the small things, it will be difficult for you to handle the greater responsibilities that come with success or blessing. Jesus Himself spoke about this in Luke 16:10 when He said, "Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much." This principle is not just about money or possessions. It's about the character you are building through everyday obedience, through your daily choices. It's about how you handle the little things, the things that may seem insignificant but are important in God's eyes. Many times we miss the blessings God has for us because we are looking for the big things. We are waiting for the great moment, the grand opportunity, the big promotion, the instant breakthrough. But God works differently. He often works in the quiet, hidden places, preparing us through small acts of faithfulness that shape our character and develop our trust in Him. This is the secret to God's timing. It's not about rushing the process, but about being faithful with what you have right now, wherever you are. The Apostle Paul understood this well. He was a man who faced much hardship, but he also knew the value of faithfulness in the small things. In his letters to the early churches, Paul often speaks of contentment and perseverance in the midst of trials. In Philippians 4:11-13, he writes, "I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through him who gives me strength." Paul knew that his faithfulness to God didn't depend on his circumstances. He had learned that in every season, in every moment, God was at work, preparing him for something greater. Perhaps you are going through a season of small things right now. Perhaps you're in a place where it feels like your efforts are unnoticed, your work is unseen, and your progress is slow. You may be asking, why am I still in this place? Why hasn't God opened the doors I've been praying for? Why does it feel like I'm stuck? But let me tell you, God is never wasting your time. Even in seasons of waiting, even in seasons that seem to drag on with little progress, God is doing something in you. He is shaping your heart, teaching you to trust him, and preparing you for the greater things he has ahead. One of the greatest lessons we can learn in these moments is that God is working even when we cannot see it. Just as a farmer doesn't immediately reap the harvest after planting the seed, so we too must wait patiently for God's timing. The seed of faithfulness may seem small now, but in time it will produce a great harvest. Proverbs 24 says, "Sluggards do not plow in season, so at harvest time they look but find nothing. But those who remain faithful, who continue to plant and water, even when it seems like nothing is happening, will see the fruit of their labor in God's perfect timing." This is the essence of faithfulness in small things. It's about trusting that God is using the small mundane tasks to prepare you for the greater blessings ahead. It's about doing the work with excellence, even when no one is watching, knowing that God sees every act of obedience. It's about building the foundation for the future that God has planned for you, even if you can't see the full picture yet. So, my friend, let me encourage you today. If you are in a season of small things, don't give up. Don't lose heart. Keep being faithful. Keep doing the right thing, even when it feels like no one is noticing. God is preparing you for something greater. Your faithfulness today will open the door for the blessings and opportunities he has for you tomorrow. Trust him and know that he is at work even in the small things. Remember, God sees your faithfulness and he will reward it in due time. Keep trusting, keep serving, and keep moving forward, knowing that your labor is not in vain. The best is yet to come. Faithfulness in small things is the foundation for all that God desires to do in your life. It's often in the unnoticed, seemingly insignificant moments that God is preparing us for his greatest purposes. But what happens when the rewards seem far away? When the results don't come as quickly as we expect? What do we do in the waiting? The truth is, God's timing is not our timing, and his ways are far beyond our understanding. But that doesn't mean we should lose hope. In fact, it's the very opposite. It's in these moments of waiting and perseverance that our faith is being shaped and our character refined. God is at work in ways that we cannot always see, but we can trust him completely. There's a profound truth that runs through the pages of Scripture. God's timing is perfect. And when it comes to his timing, patience isn't just a virtue, it's essential. When God delays the fulfillment of a promise, or when things don't happen according to our plan, it doesn't mean he has forgotten us or that we are somehow out of his will. On the contrary, God is preparing us for something greater, and he wants us to grow in faith and dependence on him, even in the midst of our struggles and waiting. Consider the story of Abraham, a man who was promised by God that he would become the father of many nations. God gave Abraham a promise that seemed impossible, especially considering his age and the barrenness of his wife, Sarah. For many years, that promise seemed delayed. He was 75 when the promise was first made, and yet he did not see its fulfillment until he was 100 years old. That's 25 years of waiting. How easy it would have been for Abraham to give up or grow discouraged during that long season. How many times do we face a promise from God, a calling on our life, or a vision for the future that seems so far away? How many times have we prayed to God, why is this taking so long? But despite the long wait, Abraham remained faithful. He trusted God. He didn't see the fulfillment of God's promise all at once, but each step, each day he chose to trust in God's perfect timing. And that's the key, trusting that God knows what he is doing even when we don't. Abraham's faith was tested, but God was preparing him for something far greater than he could ever imagine. And in God's perfect timing, when Abraham and Sarah were well beyond childbearing years, God fulfilled his promise and gave them a son, Isaac. There's a powerful message in this. When we look at the lives of those who have gone before us, we see that they had to wait. They had to trust. But they also had to learn that God is never in a hurry and he's never late. He is always on time. And in those times of waiting, he is doing something in us, something that is vital to our future, something that will prepare us for the blessings he has ahead. The same is true for your life today. You may feel like the promise is delayed, that your dreams are out of reach, or that the waiting is too long. You might be in a season where you feel like you're stuck, wondering when things will change, when the breakthrough will come, or when the prayers you've been praying will be answered. But I want to remind you today, God has not forgotten you. God is at work even in the waiting, and his timing is perfect. One of the things that God teaches us during times of waiting is to let go of our own control and trust in his sovereignty. It's easy to become frustrated when things don't happen according to our timeline, but it's in those moments that we must learn to surrender. We must let go of our own plans and trust in his. This is a key element of faithfulness in the small things. It's trusting God even when we don't have all the answers. It's choosing to walk by faith, not by sight. And it's knowing that God's timing is always best, even when we can't see the full picture. I think about the Apostle Paul and the letters he wrote to the early church. Paul was a man who experienced many delays, many setbacks, and many trials. And yet he never wavered in his faith. In fact, in Philippians 4:11-13, Paul speaks of his contentment in all circumstances. He writes, "I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through him who gives me strength." Paul understood that no matter what the situation looked like, God was with him, and God would provide the strength he needed. And he knew that his faithfulness in the small things, his patience, his trust in God's timing, was building the foundation for greater things to come. In the waiting, we are learning to lean on God, to trust in his sovereignty, and to rely on his provision. We are learning that God's timing isn't just about when things happen, but about what he is doing in us as we wait. And when the time comes for God to reveal his plan for our lives, we will be ready. We will be strengthened by our experiences, and we will be better equipped to handle the blessings he has in store. So, I encourage you today to trust God's timing, or trust that he is working even when it feels like nothing is happening. Trust that he is preparing you for something greater, even if you can't see it yet. Your waiting is not in vain. It's not wasted. It's part of the process that God is using to shape you and refine you. You may be waiting for a breakthrough, but God is using this time to develop your character, to deepen your faith, and to prepare you for the future he has in store. Remember, God's timing is perfect. It's always right, even when it doesn't align with our expectations. He sees the bigger picture. He knows what's best. And when he brings the answer, when he opens the door, it will be worth the wait. Trust in him today. Keep walking by faith and know that God is at work in your life, even in the waiting. It is often said that God works in mysterious ways, and while that may sound like a trite expression, it holds a profound truth. God's ways are indeed beyond our understanding, and his timing often defies human logic. We want things to happen on our schedule. We want prayers to be answered right away, blessings to come in abundance, and our struggles to end the moment we utter a plea for relief. But God's timing is not bound by our expectations, and it's in those moments of waiting, of delay, that we are being shaped, molded, and prepared for what is ahead. When you find yourself in a season of waiting, it can feel like nothing is happening. You may question whether God is listening to your prayers, whether he has forgotten you, or whether he's simply indifferent to your struggles. But hear me clearly, my friend. God has not forgotten you. He sees you. He knows your heart. He knows your needs. And he is working in ways that are invisible to the human eye. If we look closely at Scripture, we see countless examples of God working behind the scenes, orchestrating events in ways that we can't always comprehend. Take Joseph, for example. Joseph was a young man with dreams of greatness. He saw himself as someone who would rise to prominence, someone who would lead and influence. But his journey to that dream was anything but straightforward. His brothers, filled with jealousy, threw him into a pit, sold him into slavery, and abandoned him. For years, Joseph suffered in Egypt, working in a foreign land under difficult circumstances. It seemed as if his dreams had been dashed. It seemed as though God had forgotten his promise to Joseph. But friends, God was at work even when Joseph couldn't see it. God was orchestrating every step, every moment, every encounter to bring about his perfect plan. Joseph's time in Egypt, his time of suffering, was not wasted. It was a season of preparation. God was refining Joseph's character, preparing him for the position of leadership he had planned for him all along. When the time was right, when God's timing was perfect, Joseph was elevated to a place of authority, and his dreams were fulfilled in a way that he never could have imagined. And when he looked back on all that he had endured, Joseph declared to his brothers in Genesis 50:20, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." You see, God's timing may not always make sense to us, but it is always right. What we view as delays are actually times of divine preparation. When God doesn't act when we expect him to, it doesn't mean he is inactive. He is working even when we can't see it. He is moving behind the scenes, aligning circumstances, and preparing us for the greater things he has in store. There is a lesson in this for all of us. When life doesn't go according to our plan, when the path seems unclear, and when the promise feels far away, we must remember that God is still at work. And in those moments, we must remain faithful. We must trust that his plan is better than ours, that his timing is perfect, and that he is preparing us for something far greater than we can imagine. God doesn't waste our waiting. He uses it to build our faith, to strengthen our trust, and to shape our character. We also must understand that God's delays are not necessarily denials. There are times when we pray for something, and we believe that it is God's will, and yet the answer doesn't come immediately. Perhaps you've been waiting for a breakthrough in your life, maybe in your career, in your relationships, or in your finances. You've prayed, you've waited, but the answer hasn't come. You may be wondering, oh, why, God? Why haven't you answered my prayers? Friend, God's delays are not a sign that he is ignoring you. They are a sign that he is preparing you for what is to come. It's easy to assume that when God doesn't answer our prayers right away, he is denying us what we desire. But the truth is, his ways are higher than ours. His plans are better than ours. And sometimes he delays the answer because he is preparing us for something far greater than what we can imagine. Take the story of the Israelites as they wandered in the desert. God had promised them a land flowing with milk and honey, a place of prosperity and peace. Yet, despite the promise, they found themselves wandering in the wilderness for 40 years. Why the delay? Was God not faithful to his word? Was he not concerned about their well-being? No, my friends. God was working. He was teaching them, refining them, and preparing them for the blessings he had promised. They had to learn to trust him completely, to rely on his provision and to follow his leading. The wilderness was not a sign of God's abandonment. It was a place of divine preparation. And so in your own life, when it feels as if God is delaying the answer to your prayers, remember that his delays are not denials. He is preparing you for what is to come. He is refining your faith. He is building your trust in him. And when the time is right, when his perfect timing unfolds, you will see that it was worth the wait. God's timing is always right, my friends. He is never early, and he is never late. He is working in ways that we cannot see, orchestrating events behind the scenes, and preparing us for the future he has planned. And when we trust in his timing, when we surrender our own plans and desires to his will, we will experience the fullness of his blessings. As you walk through life, remember that the waiting is not wasted. It is a season of preparation. It is a time when God is shaping you, refining your character, and building your faith. So when you find yourself in a season of waiting, don't lose heart. Trust in God's perfect timing. Know that He is at work even when you can't see it, and that He will fulfill His promises in your life at just the right time. When we walk through life, we all face seasons of uncertainty. Life is full of ups and downs, and sometimes it seems as though we're standing in the midst of a storm with no shelter in sight. The winds are fierce, the waves are crashing all around us, and we wonder, God, where are you in all of this? It's in those moments of deep struggle and confusion, that we must hold on to something greater than our own understanding. We must hold on to the truth that God is always with us. He is present, He is sovereign, and He is working even when we cannot see it. It's often said that the night is darkest just before the dawn, and in our own lives, it is often the hardest moments that bring about the greatest revelations of God's power and faithfulness. In times of difficulty, we often want to give up. We want to throw in the towel. We want to walk away from the struggle because it feels too much to bear. But in those moments, we must remember that God is not distant. He is not absent. He is working in ways that we may not fully understand, but His work is as real as the breath in our lungs. When we're in the middle of our own personal storm, whether it's a financial struggle, a family issue, or a personal crisis, it's easy to feel abandoned. It's easy to believe that God has somehow forgotten us. But this is a lie, my friends. God has not abandoned you. God does not abandon His children. His word tells us that He is always with us, that He will never leave us or forsake us. Deuteronomy 31:6. It is in those times of hardship that God is often doing His greatest work in us. He is molding us, shaping us, preparing us for something greater. One of the most powerful truths we can cling to in these moments is the fact that God is faithful. His faithfulness does not depend on our circumstances. Whether we are on the mountaintop or in the valley, whether things are going well or we are struggling, God remains faithful. He does not change with the seasons of life. He is the same yesterday and forever. And it is in our times of struggle that we see His faithfulness most clearly. I think of the words of the Apostle Paul in 2 Corinthians 4:8-9. We are hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed. These words remind us that even in our hardest moments, God is working. Even when it feels as though the weight of the world is upon us, God is still with us. He has not left us. He will not leave us. He is carrying us through the storm, and He is using these challenges to grow us and strengthen our faith. It's also important to understand that God often uses seasons of struggle and waiting to refine us. It's easy to want to avoid these moments, to wish they would pass quickly, but we must remember that God is refining us in the process. In Isaiah 48:10, God says, See, I have refined you, though not as silver. I have tested you in the furnace of affliction. Just as gold is refined in fire, so too are we refined through the trials of life. God uses the difficult moments to remove impurities from our lives, to make us more like His Son, Jesus Christ. And while the process may be painful, it is necessary for our growth. But how do we trust God in the midst of the storm? How do we hold on to our faith when everything around us seems to be falling apart? The answer lies in remembering who God is. We must remember that God is sovereign. He is in control of all things, and nothing happens outside of His will. The storm may seem overwhelming, but it is never beyond His reach. God is working through every trial, every challenge, every setback. He is using it to accomplish His purposes in our lives. And while we may not understand it in the moment, we can trust that He is working all things together for our good. Romans 8:28. The story of Job is a powerful reminder of this truth. Job was a man who suffered greatly. He lost his wealth, his health, and his family, and in the midst of his suffering, he cried out to God. He didn't understand why these things were happening to him, but he continued to trust God. Now, Job's story is one of perseverance, one of faith in the midst of adversity. And in the end, God restored everything Job had lost, and he was blessed even more than before. Job didn't understand his suffering, but he trusted in God's sovereignty. And in the end, God proved Himself faithful. We too must trust in God's sovereignty. We must trust that even in the darkest moments, God is working. He is using the storm to shape us, to strengthen us, and to draw us closer to Him. And while it may feel as though we are walking through the fire, we can take comfort in the fact that God is walking with us. He has promised that when we pass through the waters, He will be with us, and when we walk through the fire, we will not be burned. Isaiah 43:2. In times of struggle, we also must remember that God is not only working in us, but He is working through us. He is using our pain, our struggles, and our challenges to bring glory to His name. Just as Jesus' suffering brought salvation to the world, so too can our suffering be used by God to bring others to Him. The way we respond to our struggles can be a testimony to the faithfulness and goodness of God. When we trust in Him, when we rely on His strength, when we keep our eyes fixed on Him, others will see His glory in our lives. The storm will pass, my friends. The winds will subside, and the sun will shine once more. But until that moment comes, we must hold fast to the truth that God is with us. He is working in the midst of the storm. He is faithful, and He is using our struggles for His glory and for our good. So when the storm rages, when the winds howl and the waves crash, remember, God is working. He is with you. He is faithful, and He will bring you through this storm. As we come to the final thought, let me remind you that even in the midst of your trial, God has a purpose for your pain. It is so easy to look at your struggles and think, why me, Lord? It's so easy to believe that your suffering has no meaning or that you are just facing obstacles that seem insurmountable. Yet the truth is that God has a plan in it all. Your struggle, your pain, your trial, all of these things are being used by the hand of a loving, sovereign God to shape you into who He wants you to be. It's often in the deepest valleys that we encounter the richest blessings. You see, God's plan is always greater than our own. What may appear as a detour in life is often His divine plan in motion. When the road ahead seems filled with uncertainty, when we cannot see the way forward, we can take heart in knowing that God is still in control. It is at those moments when we feel completely lost that God is working the most, preparing us for something far greater than we could ever imagine. We must never forget that God's timing is perfect, even when it seems delayed. Think about the story of Abraham and Sarah. God promised Abraham that he would be the father of many nations, but year after year that promise seemed to go unfulfilled. It wasn't until Abraham was 100 years old and Sarah was 90 that God delivered on His promise. But even then, God was teaching them to trust in His timing. Abraham and Sarah had to wait. They had to trust that God's promise was true and that His timing would not fail them. And when Isaac was finally born, it was a testimony to the faithfulness of God. Your situation may feel like a long wait. It may feel as though God has forgotten you. Then the God is forgotten. It may feel as though the answer is delayed and the waiting is unbearable, but I want to encourage you with this truth. God has not forgotten you. His timing is never too early and never too late. His perfect plan is unfolding in your life. Even when you cannot see it, you are not waiting in vain. You are being prepared for something great, something that will bring glory to God and blessings into your life. And the waiting, my friend, is not wasted. You are being refined, shaped, and strengthened in the process. It is during the waiting that God builds your character, deepens your faith, and prepares you to step into the fullness of His plan. The Apostle Paul reminds us in Romans 5:3-4 that we also glory in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance, character, and character, hope. The struggle is not in vain. It is working in you to produce perseverance, and that perseverance will lead you to the hope that only God can give. There is another important aspect of waiting on God's timing. We must learn to trust Him in the process. Trust is a fundamental part of the Christian walk. It is easy to trust God when things are going well, but the true test of faith comes when the road is rough and the skies are dark. It is when we are in the midst of a storm that we must learn to trust in God's goodness, even when we don't understand what He's doing. Trust means surrendering our will to His, trusting that He knows what is best for us even when we cannot see the outcome. The psalmist writes in Psalm 37:5, "Commit your way to the Lord. Trust in Him and He will act." Trust is not a passive thing. It requires action. Trusting in God means committing your way to Him, laying your burdens before Him and leaving them in His hands. It means saying, God, I don't know how this is going to turn out, but I trust that you are working in this situation for my good. Trusting in God's timing means knowing that He will act in His perfect way at the perfect time. You see, in the midst of our struggles, we often want to rush the process. We want to move things along to force God's hand, but we must resist that temptation. God's timing is never late, and it is never early. It is perfect. His ways are higher than our ways, and His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. Isaiah 55:9. When we are tempted to hurry the process, we must remember that God knows what He is doing. We must trust that His plan is unfolding just as it should, even when it doesn't make sense to us. The Bible is full of examples of people who had to wait on God's perfect timing. Think of Joseph, who was sold into slavery by his brothers. He spent years in prison, falsely accused, and yet through all of it, God was preparing him for a greater purpose. Joseph didn't know that his trials were leading him to a place of power and influence where he could save not only his family but an entire nation. Joseph had to trust God's timing. He had to wait for God's plan to unfold in the way that God intended. And in the end, Joseph was able to look back and say, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good." Genesis 50:20. His waiting was not wasted. It was part of God's perfect plan. God is doing the same thing in your life. You may not understand it now, but your waiting is not in vain. God is preparing you, shaping you, and refining you for the purpose He has called you to. And when His perfect timing comes, you will see that He was working all along. As we conclude, I want to remind you that in the waiting, God is not distant. He is with you. He is working behind the scenes, orchestrating everything in your life to bring about His perfect will. So don't give up. Trust in God's timing, trust in His faithfulness, and know that He is working all things together for your good. His plan for your life is unfolding in ways you can't even imagine. And when the time is right, you will see the beauty of His perfect timing. Trust Him, wait on Him, and know that in the waiting He is doing something incredible in your life.